For decades, Princess Anne has been known as the hardest-working royal, a woman who rarely seeks the spotlight, rarely gives dramatic interviews, and rarely finds herself at the center of palace headlines. Yet behind the walls of Buckingham Palace, many royal observers believe she may now hold something far more valuable than public attention: the complete confidence of King Charles himself. While Queen Camilla stands beside the king at glittering state banquets and Prince William prepares for the throne that will one day be his, it is Princess Anne who appears to have become the monarchy's quiet pillar of stability during one of its most uncertain periods. As King Charles continues to balance the demands of the crown alongside ongoing health challenges, every decision about who shoulders key responsibilities has taken on extraordinary significance, and according to royal commentators, the king's choices have revealed a pattern that few expected. Why has Charles repeatedly turned to his younger sister instead of expanding William's role more aggressively? Why has Anne been entrusted with some of the monarchy's most sensitive responsibilities despite never being destined for the throne? And what message does that send about the future of the royal family? The answers reach far beyond ceremonial titles or public appearances. They lead into decades of loyalty, constitutional planning, Queen Elizabeth II's long-term vision, and a lifetime of quiet service that earned Anne a level of trust few members of the royal family have ever enjoyed. Some commentators even argue that her influence today extends well beyond what most people realize, though much of the monarchy's internal decision-making remains private. So, is this simply a practical response to extraordinary circumstances? Or is King Charles quietly reshaping how the modern monarchy operates? And if Princess Anne has truly become the crown's most trusted guardian, what could that mean for Queen Camilla, Prince William, and the next chapter of Britain's royal family? To understand why Princess Anne has suddenly become one of the most important figures inside the monarchy, we have to go back decades to family sacrifices, constitutional changes, and a promise of duty that never wavered. For generations, the British monarchy has operated according to traditions that appear almost unbreakable. Every role has its place, every title carries an expectation, and every step toward the future is carefully mapped out long before the public ever notices. That is why, when King Charles III began quietly relying more heavily on Princess Anne during one of the most challenging periods of his reign, royal commentators immediately started asking the same question: why Anne? On paper, the answer should have been Prince William. As the Prince of Wales and heir to the throne, William has spent his entire life preparing to become Britain's next monarch. His future has never been in doubt. From childhood, he has been educated, trained, and gradually introduced to the responsibilities that one day will rest entirely on his shoulders. Whenever a reigning monarch faces increasing pressures, history suggests that the heir naturally assumes a larger share of public responsibilities. Many expected exactly that to happen. Instead, observers noticed something different. As King Charles continued carrying out constitutional duties while also managing ongoing health challenges, Princess Anne seemed to become even more central to the monarchy's daily rhythm. She was everywhere meeting charities, representing the crown across the United Kingdom, attending military ceremonies, supporting Commonwealth organizations, and appearing at events that rarely generate international headlines but remain essential to the institution's long-term stability. Unlike many modern public figures, Anne has never relied on carefully crafted publicity campaigns. She does not dominate social media. She rarely gives personal interviews. She has never appeared interested in shaping a glamorous public image. Yet year after year, she consistently records one of the busiest schedules of any working royal, often carrying out hundreds of official engagements that quietly keep the monarchy connected to communities throughout Britain and beyond. Royal commentators have frequently described her as the monarchy's most dependable working member, not because she seeks influence, but because she simply shows up again and again regardless of the circumstances. That reputation did not develop overnight. It was earned through decades of consistency. Still, one question remained. If William is the future king, why would Charles appear to depend so heavily on his sister instead of accelerating William's transition into an even larger leadership role? Many observers believe the answer lies not in William's abilities, but in the extraordinary circumstances surrounding the royal family over the past several years. During a period that placed enormous emotional pressure on the family, Catherine, Princess of Wales, stepped back from public duties while focusing on her health and recovery. Throughout that difficult time, William significantly reduced his own official schedule in order to support his wife and remain present for their 3 children. For many people, that decision reflected something deeply human. Behind the ceremonial uniforms, state banquets, and royal traditions is a husband and father facing challenges familiar to countless families around the world. While constitutional responsibilities remain important, there are moments when personal responsibilities naturally take precedence. That created an unusual situation. Britain still needed a functioning monarchy. Government business continued. Military ceremonies continued. Charitable organizations continued. International visitors continued. The crown could not simply pause. Someone had to absorb the additional workload. Princess Anne was uniquely positioned to do exactly that. Unlike William, Anne was not balancing the demands of raising young children. Unlike many senior royals, she had already spent decades navigating virtually every aspect of royal life, from diplomatic visits to constitutional ceremonies. She possessed something that cannot easily be taught: experience accumulated over more than half a century of public service. Just as importantly, Anne has little reason to be viewed through the lens of political ambition. She is not waiting to become queen. She is not building support for a future reign. She is not competing for succession. Her constitutional position has remained clear for decades, allowing many observers to see her as one of the least politically complicated members of the royal family. That neutrality has often strengthened her reputation as someone focused almost entirely on service rather than status. It is precisely this combination of experience, stability, and institutional knowledge that has led many royal experts to suggest that King Charles naturally turned toward the one person who already understood nearly every corner of the monarchy's complex machinery. Of course, much of the monarchy's internal decision-making remains private, and the palace does not publicly disclose every discussion or delegation of responsibilities. As a result, many claims about exactly how responsibilities are divided rely on reporting, expert analysis, and informed commentary rather than official confirmation. Even so, the visible pattern has been enough to fuel widespread discussion among royal watchers. Each appearance seemed to reinforce the same impression. When the institution required reliability, Anne was there. When continuity mattered, Anne was there. When experience was needed, Anne was there. It became increasingly difficult to ignore the possibility that King Charles viewed his sister not simply as another senior royal, but as one of the monarchy's most trusted guardians during a period of significant transition. Yet this growing confidence did not suddenly emerge after Charles became king. In reality, its roots stretch back much further. Long before Charles ascended the throne, another monarch had been quietly observing Princess Anne's remarkable work ethic year after year. Few people understood the demands of the crown better than Queen Elizabeth II, whose reign spanned 7 decades of political change, family triumphs, constitutional challenges, and global transformation. Elizabeth had watched every member of her family perform under pressure. She knew who embraced responsibility. She knew who struggled with it. And many royal historians believe she recognized something extraordinary in her only daughter long before the rest of the world fully appreciated it. If King Charles appears to trust Princess Anne today, there is a compelling reason many believe that confidence did not begin with him at all. It may have been inherited from the one person whose judgment carried more weight than anyone else's, Queen Elizabeth II. Long before King Charles ever faced the responsibilities of the throne, another monarch had already identified the one person she believed could always be counted on. Queen Elizabeth II rarely explained her decisions publicly. She didn't need to. Throughout her 70-year reign, she developed a reputation for observing people far more carefully than she spoke about them. Behind the carefully measured smiles and formal ceremonies was a monarch who spent decades learning exactly how each member of her family handled pressure, responsibility, and public duty. Few people understood that better than Princess Anne. Unlike many modern royals, Anne never appeared interested in becoming a celebrity. She wasn't chasing magazine covers or carefully curated public images. She wasn't trying to dominate headlines or build a personal brand. While others attracted enormous media attention, Anne quietly built something far less visible, but arguably far more valuable. She built trust. Year after year, Queen Elizabeth watched her daughter accept assignments that many others might have preferred to avoid. Whether representing the crown overseas, attending countless charitable engagements, or visiting communities facing difficult circumstances, Anne developed a reputation for approaching every commitment with the same level of professionalism. There were no dramatic speeches, no carefully orchestrated publicity campaigns. Just work, lots of it. That consistency gradually became one of her defining characteristics. Royal historians often point out that Anne has regularly ranked among the busiest working members of the royal family, completing hundreds of official engagements each year. While numbers alone never tell the full story, they reflect something important: reliability. The Queen knew that when Anne accepted an obligation, it would be fulfilled. That kind of dependability cannot be manufactured overnight. It is earned over decades. Perhaps that is why Elizabeth increasingly entrusted Anne with responsibilities that extended beyond simple ceremonial appearances. During Commonwealth visits and diplomatic tours, Anne frequently represented the crown in situations requiring experience, patience, and an understanding of complex relationships built over generations. These weren't necessarily the glamorous assignments that attracted global television coverage. Instead, they were often the quieter moments that helped preserve Britain's diplomatic relationships and reinforce the monarchy's role as a symbol of continuity. To many observers, Anne became the embodiment of the principle her mother valued above almost everything else: duty before recognition. That philosophy had shaped Elizabeth's own reign from the moment she unexpectedly became queen in 1952. It also appeared to shape how she evaluated those around her. Titles mattered, traditions mattered, but commitment mattered even more. One milestone that reflected Elizabeth's confidence came in 1987, when Anne received the title of Princess Royal. Although traditionally granted to the monarch's eldest daughter, it is not automatically bestowed. It remains entirely the sovereign's decision. By granting Anne that historic title, Elizabeth acknowledged not only family tradition but also decades of dedicated service. It became another signal that Anne occupied a uniquely respected place within the institution. Years later, additional honors followed, reinforcing her standing inside the royal family. Yet perhaps the most significant developments occurred not during glittering ceremonies, but within Britain's constitutional framework. As Queen Elizabeth entered the later years of her reign, practical questions about continuity became increasingly important. The monarchy had always relied on carefully designed legal mechanisms to ensure stability should a monarch become temporarily unable to perform official duties. Those mechanisms included the role of Counsellors of State. Traditionally, certain senior members of the royal family could be called upon to carry out specific constitutional functions on behalf of the sovereign under defined circumstances. It was never about replacing the monarch. Instead, it was about ensuring that the machinery of the state could continue to operate without interruption. By 2022, however, the royal family looked very different than it had only a few years earlier. Prince Harry was no longer a working royal. Prince Andrew had stepped away from public duties following well-publicized controversies. The list of available senior royals had become significantly smaller. Recognizing those realities, Parliament passed legislation allowing Princess Anne and Prince Edward to continue serving as Counsellors of State, strengthening the monarchy's ability to function if additional support became necessary. Importantly, this change did not make Anne a regent, nor did it transfer the powers of the monarch to her. Rather, it expanded the pool of experienced working royals who could legally assist with certain constitutional duties when required. Even so, many royal commentators viewed the move as another indication of the immense confidence placed in Anne's judgment and reliability. For Queen Elizabeth, this was entirely consistent with a lifetime of observation. She had seen Anne perform through changing governments, international crises, family upheavals, and enormous cultural shifts. She had watched her daughter remain remarkably steady while public opinion surrounding other members of the royal family often fluctuated dramatically. Perhaps most importantly, Anne never appeared motivated by personal advancement. She had no expectation of inheriting the throne, no campaign for greater influence, no obvious political incentive. Her role was simple: serve the crown. That quiet sense of purpose distinguished her from nearly everyone else around her. By the time Charles became king, Anne already possessed something few people can acquire, regardless of age or title: institutional memory. She understood not only how the monarchy functioned today, but why it functioned that way in the first place. She had witnessed decades of constitutional evolution firsthand, working alongside one of Britain's longest reigning monarchs through moments of celebration, uncertainty, and profound national change. For Charles, that experience represented an extraordinary resource. He wasn't simply inheriting a sister with decades of public service. He was inheriting someone whom Queen Elizabeth herself had trusted for much of her reign. And while Elizabeth may have quietly laid the foundation, Charles would soon begin sending his own unmistakable signals that Princess Anne's importance inside the monarchy had entered an entirely new chapter. The most visible of those signals would arrive on one of the biggest days in modern royal history, a day watched by millions around the world, when every position, every gesture, and every honor carried meaning far beyond simple ceremony. If Queen Elizabeth quietly laid the foundation for Princess Anne's growing constitutional importance, King Charles found the perfect moment to reveal just how much confidence he had in his sister. That moment came on the 6th of May 2023, the coronation. For most viewers around the world, it was a breathtaking display of history. Golden carriages rolled through London's streets. Ancient traditions unfolded inside Westminster Abbey. Military bands played. Thousands lined the procession route, while millions watched from their televisions. But royal historians often point out that a coronation is never just a ceremony. It is also a carefully choreographed message. Every uniform, every position, every title, every person standing near the monarch tells a story. Nothing is accidental. And among all the symbolism surrounding King Charles III's coronation, one decision immediately caught the attention of experienced royal observers. Princess Anne was appointed Gold Stick in Waiting. To the average viewer, the title may have sounded like another ancient ceremonial role with little modern relevance. In reality, its history stretches back centuries. Traditionally, the Gold Stick serves as the monarch's personal bodyguard during major state occasions, carrying significant ceremonial responsibility while symbolizing absolute loyalty to the sovereign. It is one of the highest marks of personal trust a monarch can bestow during events of national importance. Charles could have chosen someone else. Instead, he chose Anne. Then came the image that quickly spread around the world. As the magnificent Gold State coach carried the newly crowned king and queen through London, Princess Anne rode directly behind it on horseback, dressed in full military uniform. The picture was unforgettable. While cameras naturally focused on the golden coach carrying Charles and Queen Camilla, many royal commentators found themselves equally fascinated by the determined figure riding just. It was a striking visual statement. Steady, disciplined, protective. For countless viewers, it perfectly reflected the role Anne had played throughout much of her life, rarely seeking attention herself, yet always positioned where she could quietly support the institution. Following the coronation, Anne herself joked about the assignment with characteristic humor, saying the role solved one practical problem because it meant she did not have to travel inside the crowded carriage. The lighthearted comment reflected her personality. She rarely dramatized royal life. She rarely elevated her own importance. Even after receiving one of the coronation's most visible responsibilities, she treated it as simply another job to be completed. That attitude only strengthened her public reputation. But for experienced royal observers, the symbolism remained unmistakable. Charles had publicly demonstrated his confidence in the sister who had stood beside him for decades. It was not merely about ceremony, it was about reliability. The coronation offered another revealing detail that attracted less international attention but added to the broader picture. Anne's husband, Vice Admiral Sir Timothy Lawrence, was appointed Knight Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order, one of the highest personal honors a monarch can bestow. Unlike many honors that involve government recommendations, appointments within the Royal Victorian Order are made at the sovereign's personal discretion, recognizing individuals for distinguished service to the monarch. Royal commentators interpreted the recognition as another sign of Charles's appreciation for those who had supported the institution with quiet dedication over many years. Sir Timothy had never cultivated celebrity. Like Anne, he generally preferred life away from headlines. His steady presence beside the Princess Royal had become another example of consistency rather than spectacle. Taken together, these decisions painted a picture that many observers found increasingly difficult to ignore. Charles appeared to be rewarding loyalty, not popularity, not media attention, not public relations, loyalty. That distinction matters because modern royal life has changed dramatically over the past several decades. Today's members of the royal family operate under constant media scrutiny. Every appearance generates headlines. Every photograph sparks online debate. Every public statement is analyzed around the world within minutes. Against that backdrop, Anne has remained remarkably unchanged. She has never attempted to compete for attention. She has rarely responded to criticism. She has consistently allowed her work to speak louder than public perception. Perhaps that explains why she continues to enjoy high approval ratings in many public opinion surveys, often ranking among the most respected members of the royal family. Yet no discussion of Anne's growing prominence can avoid another question that inevitably follows. If Anne has become one of Charles's most trusted advisors and representatives, where does that leave Queen Camilla? After all, Camilla occupies a position unlike anyone else's. She is the queen. She accompanies the king at state banquets, official visits, remembrance ceremonies, and diplomatic occasions. She represents the monarchy both at home and abroad. As queen consort, her public role is highly visible. However, constitutional experts frequently emphasize that visibility and constitutional authority are not the same thing. The position of queen consort has always been fundamentally different from that of the sovereign. Unlike the monarch, a queen consort does not automatically receive constitutional powers simply by virtue of marriage. Her responsibilities are defined largely by convention, support, and representation rather than independent authority. This distinction is sometimes overlooked in public discussions. Some commentators have argued that Charles's visible reliance on Anne reflects practical considerations rather than any deliberate slight toward Camilla. Anne brings decades of institutional experience, while constitutional responsibilities within the monarchy follow long-established legal frameworks rather than personal preference alone. Nevertheless, comparisons are almost inevitable. One woman wears the crown beside the king. The other has spent a lifetime earning his confidence through unwavering service. Those realities can coexist without necessarily being in conflict, yet they continue to fuel endless speculation among royal watchers. What makes the discussion even more fascinating is that the story does not begin with Charles, Camilla, or even the coronation itself. To understand why the relationship between Anne and Camilla continues to attract so much attention, many observers look back more than 50 years long before either woman occupied her current place within the royal family. It is a chapter involving friendship, unexpected relationships, changing circumstances, and decades of public scrutiny that would shape perceptions of both women for generations. And although much of that history belongs firmly in the past, its echoes can still be felt whenever the future of the monarchy becomes the subject of public debate. For much of her life, Princess Anne built her reputation without asking the public to notice. She never relied on carefully crafted interviews to explain her dedication. She rarely discussed her personal emotions. And unlike several members of the royal family, she almost never allowed the cameras to glimpse what life behind palace walls actually looked like. That is precisely why one particular moment caught Britain by surprise. It wasn't during a grand state banquet. It wasn't during the coronation. And it certainly wasn't during one of the hundreds of royal engagements she quietly carried out every year. Instead, it came during a BBC documentary released around the time of King Charles III's coronation. A documentary that offered viewers an unusually personal glimpse into one of the most emotional periods in modern royal history. As members of the royal family reflected on Queen Elizabeth II's final months, Princess Anne spoke with a level of honesty that many viewers had never seen before. She wasn't speaking as the Princess Royal. She wasn't delivering a carefully rehearsed royal statement. She was speaking as a daughter. Anne revealed that during her final days at Balmoral, Queen Elizabeth had expressed concern about dying there because of the enormous logistical challenges it might create for the government, palace officials, and the royal family. Even in her final chapter, Britain's longest reigning monarch was still thinking about duty, still thinking about everyone else. According to Anne's recollection, she encouraged her mother not to worry about those practical difficulties. Instead, she urged the Queen simply to be where she wanted to be, to rest, to let others handle what would inevitably come next. It was a deeply human conversation, one that reminded millions of viewers that behind the crown stood a mother and daughter facing the same emotional reality experienced by families everywhere. Then came another revelation that resonated across Britain. Anne spoke about witnessing the imperial state crown being lifted from Queen Elizabeth's coffin during the state funeral. Rather than describing only overwhelming grief, she spoke of something more complex. She felt relief. Not relief because her mother was gone, but relief because her mother's extraordinary burden had finally come to an end. For more than 70 years, Queen Elizabeth had carried responsibilities unlike those of almost anyone else in modern history. Every political crisis, every constitutional challenge, every national celebration, every international tragedy, the weight of the crown had never truly left her shoulders. Anne understood that burden perhaps better than almost anyone alive. When she described watching the crown being removed from the coffin, many viewers interpreted her words as the reflections of someone who had spent an entire lifetime observing the immense personal cost of monarchy from just a few steps away. It was one of the rare occasions when Princess Anne allowed the public to see not simply her discipline, but her compassion. The response was immediate. Across newspapers, television programs, and online discussions, many commentators praised her honesty. For years, Anne had often been described as practical, hardworking, and straightforward. Now the public saw another side. A daughter, a sister, a woman who understood that duty and emotion could exist together. That moment strengthened something Anne had quietly built over decades. Trust. Unlike popularity, trust is difficult to measure. It isn't created by a single interview. It develops slowly through years of consistency. Public opinion surveys have frequently placed Anne among the most respected members of the royal family, often alongside the Princess of Wales, and of course the enduring legacy of Queen Elizabeth II herself. While polling numbers naturally change over time, the broader pattern has remained remarkably consistent. Many Britons view Anne as dependable, authentic, uncomplicated, someone whose commitment to public service rarely appears influenced by headlines or personal ambition. For King Charles, that public confidence carries significance beyond simple approval ratings. Modern monarchies survive not through political power, but through public trust. Every working royal contributes, in different ways, to maintaining that confidence. Anne's reputation has become one of the institution's quiet strengths. Yet, perhaps even more significant than public opinion was the reaction from within the royal family itself. Prince William has spoken warmly of his aunt on several occasions over the years, praising her work ethic and dedication to public service. Royal commentators have frequently suggested that William deeply appreciates Anne's willingness to shoulder responsibilities during a period when his own priorities necessarily extended beyond official engagements. As Catherine, Princess of Wales, focused on her recovery, William's role inevitably shifted. He remained committed to his constitutional responsibilities while also prioritizing his family during an exceptionally challenging period. That balancing act was never likely to be easy. In that context, Anne's continued presence provided something invaluable: continuity. Without fanfare, without competition, without creating unnecessary headlines, rather than competing with the future king, Anne appeared to be strengthening the institution around him. Many royal analysts have argued that this reflects one of the monarchy's greatest advantages. Unlike elected governments that change with political cycles, the royal family relies upon multiple generations working together. Experience supports youth. Stability supports transition. The institution evolves without appearing to stop. That may explain why William has never appeared threatened by Anne's growing prominence. If anything, the opposite seems true. Every responsibility Anne willingly accepts today may ultimately give William additional time to prepare for the enormous role awaiting him. Time to support Catherine. Time to guide Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis through an extraordinary childhood. Time to observe his father's reign before one day beginning his own. Far from creating tension, Anne's role may actually be reducing pressure on the future king. And that possibility raises an even bigger question. If Princess Anne has become the monarchy's bridge between King Charles and Prince William, what happens when that bridge is no longer needed? Because while Anne has spent decades protecting the institution behind the scenes, the day will eventually come when William inherits the crown himself. When that moment arrives, one decision could determine whether King Charles's quiet strategy becomes a lasting blueprint for the modern monarchy, or simply a remarkable chapter in its long history. At first glance, Princess Anne's expanding role appears to be a story about trust. Look a little closer, however, and another possibility begins to emerge. Perhaps this isn't only about Anne. Perhaps it is also about Prince William. For years, the future king has been preparing for the greatest constitutional responsibility in Britain. Every public appearance, every diplomatic visit, every meeting with world leaders has been viewed as another step toward the throne. Yet becoming monarch is not something that can be rushed. It is a role unlike any other. There is no campaign, no election, no formal training program with a graduation date. Instead, every future sovereign learns by watching, participating, and gradually accepting greater responsibility over time. King Charles himself spent more than 7 decades as heir apparent before becoming king. No one understands the value of preparation better than he does. That is why some royal commentators believe Charles has adopted a remarkably practical approach to managing the monarchy during this transitional period. Rather than placing every additional responsibility directly onto William's shoulders, he appears to have relied on someone who already possesses decades of institutional experience: Princess Anne. It is a strategy that, if accurate, benefits everyone involved. Charles continues leading the monarchy. Anne provides stability and continuity. William gains something equally valuable: time to observe, time to prepare, time to support his family without carrying every constitutional burden simultaneously. Over the past several years, William has faced challenges that few heirs to the throne have experienced all at once. As Catherine, Princess of Wales, stepped back from public life while focusing on her health, William naturally adjusted his own priorities. Alongside his royal responsibilities, he devoted more attention to supporting his wife and maintaining as much normality as possible for Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. It was a reminder that even those destined for the throne remain husbands and fathers first. Millions of families understood that reality immediately. The monarchy may be unique, family is not. By continuing to shoulder an extraordinary workload, Anne helped ensure that the institution remained visible and active, without requiring William to fill every gap himself. That arrangement reflects something often overlooked in discussions about succession. Preparing to become king is not simply about increasing the number of public engagements. It is about developing judgment, understanding government, building relationships with world leaders, learning constitutional conventions, observing how unexpected crises unfold. These lessons cannot be mastered overnight. They accumulate over years, perhaps decades. William has already demonstrated many of the qualities expected of a future monarch: calmness under pressure, commitment to public service, and an ability to connect with people across different generations. Yet even the most capable heir benefits from entering the throne at the right moment rather than too early. Some historians have noted that Queen Elizabeth II became monarch unexpectedly at just 25 years old following the death of King George VI. Although she rose magnificently to the occasion, the circumstances were sudden and deeply personal. Charles's experience could hardly have been more different. He spent a lifetime preparing. Now, many observers believe he wants William to enjoy the same advantage. If Princess Anne's continued service allows that preparation to continue without unnecessary pressure, then her contribution extends far beyond the engagements listed in the court circular. She becomes something far more important: a bridge between two reigns. That idea helps explain why Anne's role has rarely been interpreted as a challenge to William's future. On the contrary, many royal analysts see the two working in complementary ways. Anne offers institutional memory. William represents institutional continuity. One understands where the monarchy has been. The other will determine where it goes next. Together, they reflect the balance that has allowed the British monarchy to survive centuries of political upheaval, constitutional reform, and dramatic social change. Experience and renewal, tradition and adaptation, duty shared across generations. King Charles appears to understand that balance well. The modern monarchy no longer functions exactly as it did 50 years ago. Public expectations have changed. Media scrutiny has intensified. The royal family operates under constant global attention, with every appearance analyzed in real time. Maintaining stability in such an environment requires more than ceremonial pageantry. It requires trusted individuals who understand the institution from the inside. That may explain why Charles has consistently emphasized service rather than spectacle. Throughout his reign, he has spoken about creating a more focused monarchy, with a smaller group of senior working royals carrying out essential public duties. Within that framework, Princess Anne's experience becomes increasingly valuable. So does William's careful preparation. Rather than competing for influence, each appears to fulfill a different role within the same long-term strategy. Anne stabilizes the present. William prepares for the future. It is a model built not on rivalry but on cooperation. Of course, much of the royal family's internal planning remains private, and it would be impossible to know every discussion taking place behind palace walls. Many interpretations offered by commentators remain just that, interpretations. Even so, the public pattern is difficult to ignore. Whenever additional support has been needed, Anne has consistently stepped forward. Whenever William has needed space to balance family and public duty, the institution has continued functioning. The transition has appeared remarkably smooth. Perhaps that is exactly what Charles hoped to achieve. The greatest success in any constitutional monarchy is often the one the public barely notices. There are no dramatic announcements, no visible power struggles, no abrupt changes, only quiet continuity. Yet history suggests that no period of continuity lasts forever. The day will eventually come when Prince William becomes King William. When that moment arrives, he will face a question remarkably similar to the one confronting Charles today. Who can he trust to help preserve the stability of the crown during a new era? The answer may reveal just how deeply Princess Anne's example has influenced not only the present reign, but the future of the monarchy itself. For centuries, the British monarchy has survived not because it resisted change, but because it learned how to adapt without appearing to abandon tradition. That balance has never been easy. Every generation inherits a different Britain, a different Commonwealth, a different public, and a different set of expectations. King Charles III understands that reality perhaps better than anyone. After spending more than 70 years preparing to become sovereign, he inherited a monarchy facing enormous challenges. Public confidence had been tested by years of family controversy. The departure of Prince Harry and Meghan from royal duties reshaped the institution. Prince Andrew's withdrawal from public life reduced the number of senior working royals. At the same time, changing public attitudes prompted ongoing debate about the monarchy's role in modern society. Then came Charles's own health challenges. Suddenly, questions that once seemed hypothetical became very real. How could the monarchy continue operating efficiently while protecting both the king and the future of the crown? For many royal commentators, the answer appears to have been remarkably simple. Rely on experience. Rely on stability. Rely on people who have already demonstrated decades of unwavering commitment. Few individuals embody those qualities more completely than Princess Anne. Throughout this story, one pattern has emerged repeatedly. Whenever the monarchy required consistency, Anne was there. When charities needed support, she was there. When military organizations required representation, she was there. When Commonwealth relationships needed careful attention, she was there. When King Charles entered a new reign during a period of uncertainty, she was there once again. Not because she demanded a greater role, not because she sought influence, but because she had spent an entire lifetime proving she could be trusted. That distinction matters. The British monarchy is often viewed through the lens of titles: king, queen, prince, princess. Yet history suggests that titles alone have never guaranteed effective leadership. Character matters. Judgment matters. Reliability matters. Perhaps that is one of the most important lessons Princess Anne's career offers. She has demonstrated that influence inside a constitutional monarchy is not measured solely by ceremonial prominence. It is also measured by confidence. Confidence earned slowly. Confidence maintained consistently. Confidence that survives changing governments, changing public opinion, and changing generations. Of course, many aspects of the royal family's internal decision-making remain private. The palace rarely discusses how responsibilities are allocated behind closed doors, and it would be inaccurate to present every public observation as confirmed fact. Much of what royal commentators describe is based on visible patterns, constitutional roles, and informed analysis rather than official announcements. Even so, those visible patterns tell an interesting story. Queen Elizabeth II repeatedly recognized Anne's dedication. King Charles has continued to rely heavily on her experience. Prince William has consistently expressed admiration for her work ethic. Across generations, one theme remains remarkably consistent: trust. That trust may ultimately become one of Charles's most enduring contributions to the monarchy. Rather than attempting to do everything himself, he appears to have embraced a model built on shared responsibility among experienced working royals. In many ways, it reflects the realities of modern leadership. Strong institutions rarely depend on one individual alone. They depend on teams, on continuity, on people whose strengths complement one another. Within that framework, Anne occupies a unique position. She bridges generations. She understands the traditions established during Elizabeth's reign. She has supported Charles during his transition, and she may continue serving as an invaluable source of experience as William prepares for his own future as king. That is not a rejection of tradition. It may actually be tradition at its strongest. Every successful monarch has depended upon trusted advisors, loyal family members, and experienced representatives capable of protecting the institution during periods of change. The faces evolve. The principle remains the same. As for Queen Camilla, her role continues to be both significant and distinct. As queen consort, she supports the sovereign through public engagements, charitable work, and official representation. Her constitutional position, however, has always differed from that of the monarch or those appointed under specific legal frameworks such as the Counsellors of State. Recognizing those distinctions helps explain why different members of the royal family carry different responsibilities without necessarily implying rivalry or exclusion. Likewise, Prince William's future has never appeared uncertain. If anything, the current arrangement may strengthen his eventual reign. Every year he spends observing his father's leadership, every constitutional lesson he learns, every challenge he witnesses, every decision he studies, adds another layer of preparation before the day the crown eventually passes to him. And perhaps that has been Charles's strategy all along. Protect today's monarchy. Prepare tomorrow's monarchy. Do both without unnecessary drama. Whether history ultimately judges this period as a quiet constitutional evolution or simply a practical response to extraordinary circumstances remains to be seen. But one conclusion seems difficult to dispute. Princess Anne has become one of the defining figures of the modern royal family, not because she inherited extraordinary power, not because she sought the spotlight, not because she asked for recognition, but because, year after year, decade after decade, she earned the confidence of those who knew the institution best. In many ways, that may be the greatest honor any royal can receive. As Britain looks toward the future, public attention will naturally focus on King Charles and, eventually, on King William. Yet behind those historic transitions stands a woman whose influence has often been measured not by headlines, but by steadfast service. Princess Anne's story reminds us that the strength of the monarchy has never rested solely on crowns, palaces, or ceremonies. It has rested on people willing to place duty above personal ambition. Whether future historians describe this era as the beginning of a new chapter for the monarchy, or simply another example of its remarkable ability to adapt, Princess Anne's legacy already appears secure. She has become a symbol of continuity in an institution built on continuity itself. And perhaps that is the greatest irony of all. The royal who never expected to wear the crown may ultimately be remembered as one of the people who helped protect it when it mattered most.